But how do I recapture the baby point of view? And I showed that that was the wrong question, because it arises entirely and exclusively out of the adult point of view. Because the adult point of view involves the fiction that I exist as an agent, independently of everything else that's going on. And so ask, how can I do this? And the important thing is to realize that the feeling of there being this isolated I is part of the game, and it has no fundamental reality, except as a convention. And therefore everything in the world has the characteristics of smoke. You know, when you blow a pipe or something and a cloud of smoke and you see it in the sunbeam, and it's full of whorls and designs and all kinds of marvelous things going on, and then slowly it disappears. Well, everything's just like that. Now, there are two attitudes you can take to that state of affairs. You can say, sour grapes, it's all a lousy, wretched trap. Here I am, I'm given all these feelings of love and attachment and joy of life, and then I fall apart. My teeth drop out, my eyes become feeble, I get cancer or cirrhosis of the liver or something, and then it all falls apart, and it's too bad. Therefore, don't become attached to things. Don't enjoy life. Treat it, holding it off like that, just like a very, very firm person who's been jilted and says, never again will I get mixed up with love, because love hurts. But on the other hand, a weaving of smoke can be very beautiful, provided you don't lean on it, provided you don't try to preserve it, catch hold of it. Then you destroy it. So exactly the same way, there's nothing in the way of form that you can lean on, that you can grasp. And if you see that, then the world of form is very beautiful. If you let it go, to love people, you must let each other go.
Go straight up. Keep right.
You are delivered as soon as you are relieved of the illusion that something is going on.
Exit now.
Continuity. This after this, after this, after this. All linking up together into a chain.
Turn left.
If we allow our thoughts, past, present, and future, to link up into a series, we put ourselves under restraint. But if we see that there is just this thought, and then this thought, and then this thought, you are liberated. You who sit here now are not the same as the people who came in at the door a little while ago. As the flame of a candle appears to be a constant flame, which we can identify as a thing, but as a matter of fact, it is a stream of hot energy, which is whatever particles, whatever gaseous molecules here are going like this the whole time, flowing upwards and disappearing. We can see that the flame has an identity. Say it is a flame. We have a noun for it. Where actually it is a process. It is flaming. And so in just precisely that way, every human being is a process. Just as the flame is the conversion of wax into gas, so you and I are the conversion of air and water and light. We are flowing vibration through which all this goes, and not for one moment are we the same. So then, the meaning of the Buddhist doctrine is that you who live today are never going to die. Because the one that's going to die will not be the you that's here now. And likewise, the one that's here now was never born. The spring does not become the summer. There is spring, and then there is summer.
Go straight up.
In the same way, when you burn wood, there are ashes, but the wood does not become the ashes. There is wood, and then there is ashes. Each is sufficient to itself. It's like wave crest, where water doesn't move laterally. But by watching it, you in your mind impose motion on the up and down of the water. And so you say, the spring becomes the summer. So likewise, you say, the baby becomes the adolescent, becomes the man, becomes the crone, becomes the corpse. And the Buddhists say no. These states follow in the same way as the apparent motion of a wave. And so, live the moment you're in. There is no other place to be. You will not die, and you were never born.
Why is it so hard to do the little things that would improve my life? The way that our minds are
Go straight up. Keep left. Keep right.
design.
Keep left.
go back then to falling in love and say it's crazy. Falling. You see, we don't say rising into love. There is in it the idea of the fall. And it goes back, as a matter of fact, to extremely fundamental things. That there is always a curious tie at some point between the fall and the creation. Taking this ghastly risk is the condition of there being life.
that existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at. But it is best understood by analogy with music. Because music, as an art form, is essentially playful. We say you play the piano. You don't work the piano. Why? Music differs from, say, travel. When you travel, you are trying to get somewhere. And of course, we, because being a very compulsive and purposive culture, are busy getting everywhere faster and faster and faster till we eliminate the distance between places. So you eliminate the distance and you eliminate the journey. Because the fun of the journey is to travel, not to obliterate traveling. In music, though, one doesn't make the end of a composition. If that were so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. Same way in dancing. You don't aim at a particular spot in the room. That's where you should arrive. The whole point of the dancing is the dance. Now, but we don't see that as something brought by our education into our everyday conduct. We've got a system of schooling which gives a completely different impression. It's all graded. And what we do is we put the child into the corridor with a kind of, come on, kitty, kitty, kitty. And yeah, you go to kindergarten, you know, and that's a great thing, because when you finish that, you'll get into first grade. And then, come on, first grade leads to second grade, and so on, and then you get out of grade school, and you go to high school, and it's revving up, the thing is coming. Then you're going to go to college, and by Jove, then you get into graduate school, and when you're through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you're selling insurance. And they've got that quota to make. And you're going to make that. And all the time, this thing is coming. It's coming. It's coming. That great thing, the success you're working for. Then when you wake up one day about 40 years old, you say, my God, I've arrived. And you don't feel very different from what you always felt. And there's a slight letdown because you feel there's a hoax. And there was a hoax. A dreadful hoax. They made you miss everything by expectation. Look at the people who live to retire and put those savings away. And then when they're 65, they don't have any energy left, they're more or less impotent, and they go and rot in an old people's, senior citizens community. Because we've simply cheated ourselves the whole way down the line. We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end, and the thing was to get to that end, success or whatever it is, or maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played.
Get ready to turn left.
You taught me the courage of stars
Turn
before you left. How life carries on endlessly, even after death, with shortness of breath. You explain the infinite. How rare and beautiful it is to even exist. I couldn't help but ask you to say it all again. I tried to write it down, but I could never find an end. I'd give anything to hear you say it one more time.
Go straight on.
You see, if without resonance, nothing happens. If there are no echoes, you can't hear anything. Supposing we get a room in which we blanket all the walls and blanket the floor, soundproof it in every possible direction, you can hardly hear anyone talk, because voice requires resonance. And that's why people enjoy singing in the bathtub. They suddenly discover they've got a good voice, because suddenly the bath and the structure of the room, which is all non-soundproofed, resonates their voice. That's why you use a violin or a cello or a bass fiddle has a big wooden structure to make the sound resonant, to play back to itself. So therefore, if you understand perfectly clearly that you can't do anything to find that very, very important thing, God, enlightenment, nirvana, whatever, then what? Well, I find, it's so stupid, because even if I tell myself, well, there's nothing I can do about it, why did I say that? You see? Why did I say that? Why did I go out of my way to tell myself there's nothing I can do about it? Because in the back of my mind, in this universe, there is one great energy, and we have no name for it. People have tried various names for it, like God, like Brahman, like Tao. But in the West, the word God has got so many funny associations attached to it that most of us are bored with it. When people say God the Father Almighty, most people feel funny inside. And so we like to hear new words. We like to hear about Tao, about Brahman, and Tathata, and such strange names from the Far East, because they don't carry the same associations of mawkish sanctimony and funny meanings from the past. And actually, some of these words that the Buddhists use for the basic energy of the world really don't mean anything at all. The word Tathata, which is translated into suchness or thusness, based on the word tat, which in Sanskrit means that, and so tat tvam asi, that thou art, or in modern American, you're it. But da, that's the first sound a baby makes when it comes into the world, because the baby looks around and says, da, 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 that. But according to Buddhist philosophy, all this universe is one tathata. That means 10,000 functions or 10,000 things, one suchness. And we're all one suchness. And that means that suchness comes and goes like everything else, because this whole world is an on and off system. As the Chinese say, it's the yang and the yin. Therefore, it consists of now you see it, now you don't, here you are, here you aren't. Because that's the very nature of energy, to be like waves, and waves have crests and troughs. Only, we, being under a certain kind of sleepiness or illusion, imagine that the trough is going to overcome the crest. The yin, the dark principle, is going to overcome the yang, or the light principle, and that off is finally going to triumph over on. And we, shall I say, bug ourselves by indulging in that illusion. Gee, supposing darkness did win out, wouldn't that be terrible? So we're constantly trembling, thinking that it may, because after all, isn't it odd that anything exists? It's most peculiar. It requires effort, it requires energy, and it would be so much easier for there to have been nothing at all. Therefore we think, well, since the is side of things is so much effort, you always give up after a while and you sink back into death. But death is just the other face of energy. And it's the rest, the not being anything around, that produces something around, just in the same way that you can't have solid without space or space without solid. When you wake up to this and realize that the more it changes, the more it's the same thing, that you are really a playing of this one energy, and there is nothing else but that it is you, but that for you to be always you would be an insufferable bore. And therefore, it is arranged that you stop being you after a while, and then come back as someone else altogether. And so when you find that out, you become full energy and delight. And you suddenly see through the whole sham of things. You realize you're that. We won't put a name on it. You're that. And you can't be anything else. So you are relieved of fundamental terror. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be a great hero, that you won't jump when you hear it bang, that you won't worry occasionally, that you won't lose your temper. It means, though, that fundamentally, deep, deep down within you, you will be able to be human, not a stone Buddha. You know, in Zen, there is a difference made between a living Buddha and a stone Buddha. If you go up to a stone Buddha and you hit him hard on the head, nothing happens. You break your fist or your stick. But if you hit a living Buddha, he may say, ouch. And he may feel pain. Because if he didn't feel something, he wouldn't be a human being. Buddhas are human. They are enlightened men and women. But the point is that they are not afraid to be human. They are not afraid to let themselves participate in the pains, difficulties, and struggles that naturally go with human existence. So it is then that, if I may put it metaphorically, the perfect man employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing, it refuses nothing, it receives but does not keep. In other words, this is to live without hang-ups. The word hang-up being an almost exact translation of the Japanese bonno and the Sanskrit klesha, ordinarily translated worldly attachment. But oh, that sounds a little bit, you know what I mean, it sounds pious. And in Zen, things that sound pious are said to stink of Zen. But to have no hang-up, that is to say, to be able to drift like a cloud and flow like water, seeing that all life is a magnificent illusion, a playing of energy, and there is absolutely nothing fundamentally to be afraid of. fundamental. You will be afraid on the surface. You will be afraid of putting your hand in the fire. You will be afraid of getting sick. But you will not be afraid of fear. Fear will pass over your mind like a black cloud will be reflected in the mirror. The easiest way to get into the meditative state is to begin by listening. If you simply allow yourself to hear all the sounds that are going on around you, just listen to the general hum and buzz of the world as if you were listening to music. For Hinduism, realization of the self is the goal of life. Moksha, liberation, is when you know for sure that yourself is a special case of the self. That just as you are unaware of all your organic processes, just as the beam of a headlight doesn't shine on the wire that gives it power, so in the same way one is ordinarily ignorant, or shall I say ignorant, of the root of one's own self as being the central self of all. So the Hindu image is that the self eternally plays a game of hide and seek with itself. For one kalpa, the world is manifested, and that period is called a manvantara. And during that time, the Brahman hides in all of us, pretending that it's us.
Ready to turn left.
And then at the end of the Kalpa, there comes the period called Pralaya. And in that period,
Turn left.
the Brahman comes out of the act and returns to itself in peace and bliss. This is a very logical idea. What would you do if you were God? Would it be interesting to be all the time in self-possession? Isn't the whole fun of things, as every child knows, to go on adventures, to make believe, to create illusions? And so, for some ways of talking in Hindu thought, this world is the dream of the Godhead. And so, this gets worse and worse as the time cycle goes on, until at the end of the Kali Yuga, Shiva puts in an appearance, and he dances a dance called the Tandava. And in dancing the Tandava, the whole universe is destroyed in fire. But of course, as Shiva, having done this wreckage, turns around to leave the stage, you find that on the back of his head is the face of Brahma, the creator. And it starts again. The Godhead is, of course, represented as in a way two-faced. With one face, he dreams and is absorbed in the dream world. With the other face, he is liberated. In other words, what you have to understand correctly is that from the standpoint of the self, the supreme self, the Pralaya and the Manvantara are simultaneous. So that one doesn't realize union with the self after death, later than a certain time. All references to the hereafter should correctly be understood as the herein, as a domain deeper than egocentric consciousness. When you get down to the bottom of the egocentric consciousness, you get to its limit, which is figuratively its death. Then you go on inwards, the self deeper than the conscious attention. And in that way, you go inwards to eternity. You don't go onwards to eternity. To go onwards is to find only time, more time, in which things go round and round and round forever. But to go in is to go to eternity. So they would say, now if you are realized and awake to the self, you know that you are the present. There is no other time than the present. And when you become awake to that, boredom is at an end. And you are delivered from the cycles. Not in the sense that they disappear, that you no longer go through them. You do go through them. But you know, you realize that they're not going anywhere. Supposing you liken the rhythm of these cycles to music. How to listen to music with the maximum of enjoyment? Why, surely you don't hurry it up. You don't say, let's get to the end faster. And you can hear every